When I was 21, an acquaintance sexually assaulted me. A few years later, I married a man who physically assaulted me and verbally abused me. Like many victims, I felt so ashamed that I didn't report or even seek counseling for those crimes. But unlike many victims, I launched myself into a spiritual quest to really figure out why gender-based violence happens, the deep why. And what I discovered helped heal me and just might hold a secret to female empowerment. It was about 20 years ago during this abusive relationship that I was traveling in the Middle East as a journalist, and I first heard about honor killing. I didn't know what that meant at first, but I remember feeling a chill just sweep down my body. I found out later that honor killing is a murder of a female, usually by a male relative, for immoral behavior that brings shame to the family. The behavior could be anything from looking at a boy to adultery to even being raped. And killing the woman is what restores the family's honor. There are about 20,000 of these murders annually in the Middle East, the Indian subcontinent, North Africa, and immigrant communities worldwide, including in Europe and North America. Most of the killers go free or receive light sentences. I felt a really profound empathy for the women in the honor killing zone. As an American woman, however embarrassing or inconvenient it was, I could leave the violent relationship that I was in. For a lot of these women, escaping is rarely an option. It's like the air they breathe. They gave me the courage to leave my abuser and save my own life. So I left him, I moved far away, and I started my life over again. And I started researching honor killing like my life depended on it. Without realizing it, I was probably trying to heal my own trauma. But I also wanted all women to be able to have the choice that I had, to leave and get to safety and live with dignity and self-determination again. I chose to focus my research on the origins of honor violence because I thought that something must have gone really wrong at some point in history for honor killing to have gotten started and then to become normalized. And if we could understand what that was, then maybe it would open a doorway to actually ending it someday. The published reports on the origins of honor violence said it was either Islamic, pre-Islamic, or unknown. I couldn't find any evidence for the origins being Islamic. If it were pre-Islamic, why did they stop there? There's like a heck of a lot of history before the 7th century AD. I was like, why aren't they a little more curious than that? After I exhausted the literature, I started calling people in the Middle East, non-governmental organizations, scholars, and social workers, and asking. And judging by how they cut off communication with me, I think I was asking some very taboo things about systemic violence against women. And that's when it occurred to me that honor killing has gone on unabated for millennia because of this conspiracy of silence. And it'll continue to go on unless somebody really speaks up about it. And that was about the same time I started thinking about that it's not just the 20,000 women and girls who are murdered every year who are impacted by this. What about all the other ones who are living curtailed lives in fear to avoid being killed for honor, who essentially live under a lifelong death threat or are subject to other forms of honor violence like physical, sexual, emotional, and mental abuse, harassment, stalking, false imprisonment, forced marriage, female genital mutilation. How many of them are out there? To my shock, I couldn't even find that number published. So I figured out where in the world honor killings happen, and I calculated how many females live there. It could be as high as 800 million. At least I believe that's how many women and girls live under oppressive patriarchal cultures, where many of their choices are not their own, and they could be hurt or killed if they fail to toe the line. So it took me a decade, but I did build a theory of the ancient lost origins of honor killing. A more sensible person would have written a dissertation and gotten a PhD out of it, but I wove my findings into a novel. What I didn't expect to find is that honor killing appears to be one of the lingering legacies of a pivotal time of transformation in human history that has largely been swept under the rug. In 200,000 years of Homo sapiens, only the last 5,000 to 7,000 years have been dominated by patriarchal religions and power. Archaeology tells us that in the previous 193,000 years, worship of the divine feminine was the first and primary religion almost everywhere in the world, including the honor-killing zone. For example, this is the oldest piece of art that's ever been found. This stone was carved into a voluptuous female figure, some would say a goddess. She's called the Aquiline Goddess, and she was found in the Golan Heights area of Israel, between two layers of volcanic ash, the lower level 800,000 years old, the upper level 232,000 years old, which means that this was carved by a hominid that predated the Neanderthals. Compare that to the Venus of Willendorf, which you may have heard of before, only 30,000 years old. About 100 of these figurines have been found across Eurasia. The goddess Isis emerged in about 3000 BC, and her worship spread through the Roman Empire all the way to the Danube and Rhine rivers until about 200 AD. She was called the Queen of Heaven, Earth, and the Underworld, kind of pretty much everything. And this is her son Horus nursing, a precursor to the iconic image of Jesus and Mary. And lastly, moving to the goddess-worshipping Minoan civilization of the Isle of Crete, they built this sarcophagus in about 1500 BC. And what I really love about it is, in one of the close-ups, a goddess is driving the chariot, taking the dead man to his next life. And in another panel, it shows priestesses leading the procession. What's really important about these archaeological findings, and so many more around the whole divine feminine, is that many scholars believe that the cultures where mainly a goddess was traditionally worshipped, people valued things like cooperation, compassion, partnership, reverence for nature, and the status of women was much higher. And this is evident in the art, in the surviving poetry, even in the bones that have been excavated in certain sites, like Çatalhöyük in Turkey, where male and female skeletons had equivalent nutrition. The mythologist Joseph Campbell said, "The deity you worship is the one you're capable of becoming." The patriarchal religion started to take over about 5000 BC. And it took about 5,000 years of violent aggression and the rewriting of sacred stories to finally discredit and oust the goddess, and was so thorough, the past has almost been lost. And I believe that it was in this time of transition from goddess worship to God worship, when women first became property of men, that honor killing was born. And honor killing was such an effective method of intimidating women to comply with the new system of male privilege that it stuck. Now, you don't have to go and change your religion to appreciate the implications in this. In the scope of human existence, male dominance is the outlier. For about 97% of the time, the genders have been in harmony, working in partnership with each other. It hasn't always been a man's world. In fact, it's barely been one. The stories have been rewritten. The truth has been lost, buried, or suppressed, disempowering so many of us, including the men. Few schools teach this. I had to dig for 10 years looking for this material because I didn't know where to look. But my discoveries have been profoundly healing for me and have given me great hope about the future of gender relations. And if knowing about any of this has been empowering to you, imagine what it might be like, what it might mean to the women in the honor killing zone. A recent study showed that large percentages of these women in the honor killing zone believe that they deserve to be beaten by their husbands under certain circumstances, such as going out without permission, burning dinner, or refusing sex. And more women than men believe this. Another study showed that a majority of women reject honor killing in only 3 out of 11 honor killing zone countries that were surveyed. Many of these women don't want women's rights, per se. But they weren't, in the survey, asked if they want respect, dignity, health, safety, education, employment, justice, bodily integrity, love. And something tells me, I suspect that they do. The problem is, oftentimes, women's rights are associated with the West, which can leave a bad taste in their mouth. Ironically, the women in the honor killing zone had all these women's rights and then some for millennia, long before we ever dreamed of them in the West. I think they just don't remember. And if they don't know, I wonder how they would feel if they knew that their female ancestors were queens who governed nations, high priestesses who presided over the holiest ceremonies of the great goddess, inventors, lawmakers, entrepreneurs, mothers who were exalted for being mothers, and whose name and property descended in the female line for millennia. A lot of things need to be done for women to be empowered globally, but I don't think anything can be very effective if women don't feel they're worthy. That's why I feel so strongly that we all need to know the truth of the past so that we can forge a more empowering future. Marivan Alief, she's a Kurd in Turkey. She married her cousin in an arranged marriage at age 15. They had 2 kids. One of them is disabled. Her husband beat her daily for years. She didn't think she could leave him because no one had ever done that before in their village out of fear of honor killing. But one day, after 14 years of daily abuse, Marivan had enough. She went to her parents and said, if you don't support me to divorce him, I'm going to kill myself, perhaps. And her father did the brave and rare thing. He supported her to get a divorce. at risk of ostracism by the whole community. And so she did. And to their surprise, their lives didn't fall apart in the village. In fact, as Marivan healed and gained her confidence, women in the village started looking to her as a role model to change their own lives. And this year, Marivan was elected mayor of her village. She's getting her high school diploma now at age 33. I went to Turkey this summer to meet her, made a new friend, and I'm championing her continued success. Unfortunately, Marivan's story is the exception. And my hope is that young women like Marivan and women like myself 20 years ago will know that it hasn't always been a man's world and won't wait for years to claim our humanity. The silver lining in the violence that I experienced is that it broke open my heart without killing me. I found out that I'm stronger and softer than I ever knew. Mostly, I know that I'm worthy, like a goddess, as I believe we all are.